Hello everyone, Pastor Matthew here. Today we will continue our story of Gideon, looking at Judges chapters 8 through 9. Bit of a recap from last time. Gideon was one of the other major judges within this book, and God called him to destroy the Midianites, who oppressed Israel for some time. Gideon was the youngest child of a small clan, people who worship Baal, the Midianite god, Mesopotamian god. Gideon was not your typical judge. He did not trust God. He, in fact, tested God to see if he was even worthy to follow. And then he would still try to bolster his own men, and God said, no, 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 no. Take your men, divide them in half, then take those men, make sure that they can have water lapped up like a dog, and those 300 men, you go and defeat the Midianites, which he did. Not by using swords or not by using spears or any arrows or any martial weapon, more because he did trickery, laying in pots and making lots of noise, and the Midianites fell on each other. He would then go and he would go out and kill many Midianites, including the two princes, their names being Oreb and, give me a second here, Oreb and Zeb, or Zeb. And he would carry their heads on pikes to say to his enemies, look out. I did say before Gideon was like a mob boss, and this is true. The later parts of his story, in fact, if you look at the Sunday school story, it usually stops when Gideonite does that 300 men. The sword for the Lord in Gideon. Nice ring. What happens after is much darker. You see, after he won this great victory, Gideon would go on. Not everyone in Israel followed him. In fact, the hill tribes of Ephraim did not, and they complained to Gideon, being like, hey, you didn't allow us to join your battle. And Gideon basically said to them, too bad, so sad. I won, you didn't help, bye-bye, get lost. See, Gideon had something festering in his heart. He wanted power. He wanted recognition. This is very obvious in what comes next with what he does, because what he does next is cruel, unusual, and very telling of his character. Gideon is going to defeat the rest of the Midianites. But to do this, he has to pass through a couple of different places, which are controlled by people of Israel. So, in Judges chapter 8, Gideon is going out with Oreb and Zeb, their heads, affirm. And Gideon came to the Jordan. This is chapters 8, verses 4, where we start. And Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and the 300 men who were with him, exhausted yet pursuing. He's probably with the same 300 men that he had with him during that famous battle. So he said to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. The officials of Succoth said, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand? That we should give bread to your army. So Gideon said, well then, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will flail your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And from there he went to Penuel, and spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered, and he said to the men of Penuel, when I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. Essentially here, Gideon is pursuing the kings of Midian. The people here don't believe that he's going to succeed, and so when his army comes and he says to them, hey, I've got 300 people here, feed my army, and they say no, he said, well, fine then. Once I kill these two kings, I'm coming back and I'm killing you. Yeah, this is great for the judge of God, isn't it? Saying that he's going to kill people just because they wouldn't feed his army and they insulted him. Shouldn't a man of God be higher than that? Let bygones be bygones and just go away? That's not how Judges works. Remember, part of the theme of Judges is God uses sinful people to still enact his will. And often the judges themselves are a representative of the nation that they kill. The Midianites were terrible to the Israelites, driving them into the mountain ranges and taxing them and killing them and just doing horrible things. And now Gideon is doing much the same thing. The judge fits the enemy. And Gideon definitely fits the cruelness of the Midianites. After all of this, he did eventually kill the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna. Then, after all this happened, he captured them. He captured the kings. What happens next is very cruel. Judges 8:13 through 21. Then Gideon the son of Joash returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, and he captured the young men of Succoth and questioned him. And he wrote down for him the officials and elders of Succoth, 77 men. Remember, Succoth is where he went before, and they said, we're not going to give you any food, and they ridiculed him. And he came to the men of Succoth and said, behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, well, the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna are already in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are exhausted. And he took the elders of the city, and he took thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them taught the men of Succoth a lesson. And he broke down the tower of Penuel, and killed the men of this city. That means pretty much every single man. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, where are the men whom you killed at Tabor? They answered, as you are, so were they. Every one of them resembled the son of a king. And he said to them, well, they were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you. Then he said to Jether, his firstborn, rise and kill them. But the young man did not draw a sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a young man. And then Zebah and Zalmunna said, well, rise yourself and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and he took the crescent ornaments that were on their necks of their camels. Gideon is a man of his word. He captures Zebah and Zalmunna, and then he goes back to Succoth, flails the men with briars and with thorns, and kills the men of Penuel, and has their tower fall down upon him. Then he goes the extra cruel mile. He goes to these two kings who killed his brothers and his mother. Very cruel, by the way. But he says to them, I'm going to kill you. But it's not me who's going to do it. It's going to be my youngest son. Honor here is something that has to be put into perspective. When a warrior goes out and he dies against someone who is the same as him, a warrior of equal peer, it is considered an honorable death. But to die at the hands of a boy, a child, there is no greater dishonor for them. It also shows that Gideon himself does not care. He does not treat his enemies with respect. He does not see them as anything better. Instead, he wants to humiliate them, destroy them utterly and completely. And so he would give it to his son, his youngest. The fact that the Bible goes out of its way to tell us this is a child means he cannot be any older than maybe 10, maybe even younger. And he's still saying to this little boy, go and kill them. But he cannot. He was only a boy. And Gideon, after being taunted and enrages, kills the two kings. And so Gideon wins. Yay! It feels empty and hollow, though. We went from an assassin to a woman of great power and authority and wisdom, to now a butcher, a mob boss. It only gets worse. The men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. They want to make him king. Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Okay, good. Despite everything, Gideon is still on track. But Gideon said to them, let me make a request of you. Everyone give me the earrings from the spoil. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw in their earrings into his spoil. And of the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants, purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels. And Gideon made an ephod, and put it in his city, in Ophrah. And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more. And the land rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. An ephod is essentially a monument, a tribute. But notice what the author of Judges does. He says the Israelites whored after it. That's the same language that he uses for when it goes whoring after other gods. Essentially, what this means is Israel took that ephod, that monument of Gideon's victory, and made them that into a god for themselves. They put their trust in it. They put their hopes in it. They put everything in it. And Gideon himself, even though he did not want to be king, he should have known better. He knew the hearts of his people were fickle. Yet he still did it. Because he wanted recognition. He wanted power. He wanted something. It was still good that he gave victory to the Lord. And it was still good that he said the Lord should rule over them. This is the thing about Judges that makes it so hard for many people. The people of Judges, the judges themselves, were just ordinary people. They had flaws. And yet they were still faithful. Odd as that is, they were still faithful to God. Gideon is remembered as a great judge because he did trust in God, quite begrudgingly. He did do God's will, albeit cruelly. It's hard to see this, but it is something that is coming at the same time. Bear with me. You and I are problematic. I don't think any of us would call ourselves perfect. And yet, God still uses us. He uses us to help people. I'm pretty sure that every person who's a doctor, who is fighting against this coronavirus, all the researchers, they're not perfect people. They might even do cruel things. It might seem to us being evil. Maybe they have thoughts of things that go against what our society teaches as right and good. Maybe they hold different beliefs than you do, or I do. But yet they're still working for the good. Think about myself as a pastor. I'm a sinner, same as everyone else. I am no better than anyone. I sometimes feel myself as Paul says, the chief of sinners. And yet God uses me. God would still look at me and say, I have called you. You are my own. And I will use you for my glory. There's something comforting in that. There's something comforting that I know that because of his son, Jesus Christ, because I've been washed in his blood on the cross, given new life by his resurrection from the dead, that God looks at me, though still a sinner, and yet sees me as his beloved child, his saint. And it makes me happy, knowing that there is some good that I can do through him. Even though, like Gideon, I'm not perfect, and I make bad choices, God still uses me for his good. And that all is a very big thing about Judges. The theme of Judges is God's steadfast love for his people. Oh, hello, Olaf. And that God still uses his people for his good. There's other parts of Judges that we'll continue to next time. The problem of Gideon's son, Abimelech, or his grandson, Abimelech, who would make himself into a king, and he would ultimately fail. Yes, this is my dog, Olaf. Say hi, Olaf. But ultimately, it is God's steadfast love that puts us together, that keeps us strong, because he has chosen us despite our sinfulness and says, I am your God, and I will use you for my good. So then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with his favor and give you all his peace. Amen. Want to say goodbye, Olaf? He says goodbye.